shown.
Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, John Banks is frightened. He's frightened. I don't know if people out there heard that. Oh no, he says. The Green Party knows that education can transform societies, transform communities and transform lives. Now, education was a route out of poverty for me, and it certainly can be for others. But for that to happen, New Zealand must have a strong, a free, inclusive and quality public education system whose quality does not depend on the size of your wallet, where every New Zealand child is entitled to the highest quality public education. That is where equity rests. That is where we get the best advantage from an education system to deal with the terrible issues of poverty that afflict 270,000 New Zealand children. Because despite what Bill English said this morning about poverty not really existing in this country, there is a solution to poverty, and it is education. Now, the ACT National Government is fond of promoting charter schools as a choice for Māori children, for Pacific and vulnerable children, one that is comparable to the choice wealthy parents apparently get when they choose to send their kids to private schools. That's part of the spin. But it is absolute and utter rubbish. It is absolute and utter rubbish. The reality could not be further from the truth. Charter schools offer to poor children, to Māori and Pacific children, a choice that wealthy families would not touch with a barge pole. They would not touch it with a barge pole. And I challenge any National Party member in here who sends their child to private schools to stand up and say that they would move their child from a private school to a charter school, where there are untrained teachers, where there is reduced funding, where there is no oversight and no parent representation. I challenge them to shift one of their kids into one of these schools. In fact, it's such a problem that the association representing private schools submitted against this bill, along with 2,100 other submitters. Only 93 submitted in favour. Along with 2,100 others, the Private Schools Association submitted against the bill because they know that charter schools threaten the very reputation of the New Zealand education system, which is one of the best in the world, actually. For all the spin from the other side, it is one of the best in the world. And what has been done here is importing a system that has failed elsewhere. The truth is this government wants charter schools because they're cheaper. They're cheaper and they funnel money into private profits of people that they know. These schools don't employ trained teachers. Schools which can make up their own curriculum, decide whatever they like to teach these kids, who don't need to bother with parents on school boards, can determine the length of their own school day, are free from much of the oversight. They are cheap and they are nasty. What's worse is that this government knows that it's easier to try out this experiment on the children of families who have the least power, the least likely to complain, the least resources to say if something is going wrong with their kids, the most vulnerable families. And rather than giving Māori and Pacific and less well-off Kiwi kids the best education that the government can, utilising decades of evidence built up by some of New Zealand's best educationalists, the National ACT government is inflicting this imported charter schools experiment on the children who need to be the most protected from it. And why, thank you? Why? Because of this one sole MP from a little teeny-weeny dying party that sneaked into government at the last election, and which Judith Collins is trying to protect for next time, which this government is dependent on to get through their scarce few pieces of legislation over the line. This is very much about the tail wagging the dog in this case, because that MP from that failing party has made no secret that he wants the entire public education sector privatised. That's what he said in the weekend. The Act would demand from a future government their commitment to, quote, private provision of education, unquote, unqualified declaration to privatise New Zealand's education system. So privatising the education system is what this bill is all about. Actually, charter schools are at the top of the waterfall, triggering a cascade of changes in the public education system that will lead to an elitist education system in New Zealand, where the primary school education that you get comes with a hefty price tag if it's going to be decent. And what this means for kids and for parents is that the kind of school that you get to go to will entirely depend on the size of your wallet. Let's have a quick look at some of the changes in the bill. These charter schools can be established by overseas owners as long as they have a shell company in New Zealand, and they can make a profit, as much profit as they like, from taxpayer education funds. Now, we don't believe that this is at all right, that in fact public education money should go towards public education, not private profit. And so we have introduced a supplementary order paper on this bill to ensure that no profit-making entity can establish a charter school. There must be some protections for the public purse. This is public money after all. These schools can also be established anywhere the sponsor wants to set one up, with no consideration on the impact on local schools. Now, at the moment, the Minister is legally obliged to consider the impact that a new school will have on any nearby school before she lets a private school be established or integrated into the state system. And this helps to protect public schools, state schools, from roll decline. It helps to manage the system overall. But National's pretty poor at sticking to the rules when those rules interfere with their mates and potential profit, as we saw with the decision to integrate Wanganui Collegiate School, which officials told Cabinet would damage the local school rolls if they did it. They did it anyway, because they're their mates. Nevertheless, the rule is there, but it doesn't apply to charter schools, which have the freedom to erode the roles of other local state schools and continue to undermine the public education system, as overseas evidence has shown that they will. We have a supplementary order paper which also will protect local schools from the corrosive effects of charters, obliging the Minister to consider the local school network before agreeing that a charter school can be established. Now, children need to learn from adults who know how to teach. Teaching is a skill. It is a highly professional skill. It is a profession. And children need to be taught by people who understand how children learn. That's why private schools are full of really well-trained teachers, actually, because they can afford to pay for the best. Now, that is why we need to have the best possible teachers in our state schools as well, particularly in front of our most vulnerable learners, because all of the evidence shows that the most vulnerable learners need the best possible teachers in front of them in order to be able to do well. And yet, teaching, sir, is more than just subject expertise. It's about pedagogy, it's about the science of learning. It's about a compassionate and caring profession where people dedicate their lives to the well-being of children in order to make sure that they can live good and well futures, good and well lives. The PBTA today produced a survey that showed that 86% of New Zealanders do not want untrained teachers in schools. That 86% of New Zealanders actually believe that teaching is a profession for which there should be good remuneration, for which there should be some professional acknowledgement of their skill, and they want their kids taught by professionals. 71% thought that it was wrong for private business to make a profit of public education. Now, the government has completely ignored this feedback because, of course, this deal is the result of a cup of tea, a quiet little cup of tea that they tried to keep the content of which secret, if you remember. And as a result, the most vulnerable learners in this country are now going to be have foisted on them an experiment which is proven to fail. Now, we have already said that we will require any charter school, if we are in a position after the next election, we'll require any charter school to subject itself to the integration process. And if they fail that process, they will have to close. And if they pass that process, they are in a better position to continue. Because we do not believe that these charter schools can continue to be made available to our kids when we know that even in the best case scenario, only 1 in 5 will do any well. We are opposed to this legislation and look forward to the changes that can be made in committee stages.
Dr. Cam Cole.
As Chairman of the Education and Science Committee, it's a great pleasure to rise and take this call. I just want to correct an assertion made by my colleague, Mr. Chris